Well, alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Generation to Generation, Bridging the Gap with Rex. And you will immediately notice Eva is not here for this episode. We are trying to get things balanced out as we begin her senior year in high school. And so just give us some grace, y'all. We're working through all the things. Mom and Dad have stuff to do. Young senior lady has things to do, and we're just trying to get all of this stuff on track and keep it in balance. So I asked her to just take the night off and just focus on school as we get back into that routine. So anyway, she will be back next week. And that gives me a chance to just say, hey, to those of you that are listeners and follow us on this podcast, we are so grateful that you're along for the journey, and we solicit your feedback. Please let us know how we can make this better for you, and that includes topics that you'd like to hear. Jump on our socials, let us hear from you if you'd love to hear a particular episode. I know some of you have mentioned how much you enjoy the table topics when we bring Mom in. Those are really fun for us too, by the way, because we are a family of three. We do everything together. And so we may even expand at some point where Mom's on here a lot more, because Eva and I both enjoy having her. So anyway, any comments that you have, please send those. Any topics that you would like for Eva to address as a 18-year-old senior in high school. Anything you'd like for me to address specifically as a veteran, as a pastor, as a dad, and the same thing with Lisa. Lisa was a vice president of a medical billing company. She has a lot of experience in the human resource area, is really good at dealing with people. So anything you would like for her to address professionally and her experience, and then as a mom, we'd love to hear those ideas and suggestions. So again, thanks for following along in the journey. So tonight it is nighttime. I am going to talk about an experience I had this week, and I was a little shocked by it. We just celebrated 9/11. We do memorials, as most of you know. We do memorials throughout the country just to remember what happened on September 11th, 2001. I had to think about that for a minute. September 11th, 2001, 23 years ago. It's hard to believe it's been 23 years since it happened. And if you're old enough, you remember exactly where you were. I can remember I was only 3 years old when President Kennedy was assassinated, so I do not remember that. But as I was growing up, I remember people talking about, hey, if you were old enough to remember anything, you know exactly where you were, what you were doing the day that Kennedy was shot. Well, it's the same thing with 9/11. That's probably the most surprising, traumatic event in my lifetime that just totally caught everyone by surprise. And I will never forget it. I was on the road, actually. I was on active duty in the Army. I was the officer in charge of the ROTC program at Troy University when that happened. And I was headed to Troy, and Lisa called me and said, hey, you got to get to TV as quick as you can. And just gave me a quick, what apparently was happening. So I went straight to the radio television station at Troy, and people were already gathered around all of the screens and the consoles. And I just remember walking in and the tenseness that was in the room and the disbelief, as we were watching this unfold. So again, hard to believe it's been 23 years, but 2,977 citizens lost their life that day, almost 3,000 people. 4 airplanes were hijacked. 19 hijackers died in that attack. Again, as you know, both of the Twin Towers in New York City totally destroyed. The Pentagon, one plane flew into the Pentagon, and then the 4th plane was actually overtaken by a group of passengers that realized what was going on, and they said this 4th plane is not going to hit a target. And many people believe that 4th plane was headed for the United States Capitol, and that would have been catastrophic. Not that the other things weren't. It was a terrible day in our history, and certainly for those families. And we always want to remember and honor the families and what they went through, and the first responders, the firemen, policemen, medical technicians, everybody that responded so admirably, honorably that day, and we never want to forget that. So I'm humbled that our country continues to do that and does it so well across so many locations. I know a lot of towns do it, from East Coast to West Coast. So but back to what I was going to say about the fourth airplane overtaken, the hijackers were overtaken by a group of people that were on the plane that realized what was happening, and they said, hey, not this fourth plane, it's not going to hit a target. So they took it down in a field in Pennsylvania. Everyone on board did perish in the impact, to include the hijackers. But I will never forget the name of Todd Beamer. Todd, as a matter of fact, his widow wrote a book, and she named the book after his last words. Once they had decided, they had a plan, and they had the stewardesses involved in it. And Todd's last words were, "Let's roll." So I think it's going to be the title for this episode is, hey, let's roll. There's some things that we still have to get done. And what an exciting time to be alive. I know it's real easy sometimes to get down, to get disappointed, dismayed. I had one of those incidents this week that I'm really going to talk about. That's going to be the topic of the podcast. But the title of the podcast is Let's Roll. Let's stay engaged. Let's stay positive. Let's stay energetic. Let's be life-giving to people around us, those that may disagree with us, those that may not look like us, all of those things. We just want to be a positive impact on the world around us. So I love the story of Todd Beamer. Let's roll. So here's what happened to me this week during the 9/11 memorial service that I was invited to. And let me say this right off the bat. It was done exceptionally well. I was really pleased with everything I saw, just the spirit of the people that were there. It was flawless, really executed well from start to finish. But there was one hiccup, and it was on the subject of prayer. I had been invited to say an invocation, and I kind of thought, man, that's unusual for this particular, I'm going to call it an agency or an environment, that for this particular agency to ask for a pastor to say an invocation. But I thought, hey, if they're inviting, I'm going to take it and I'm going to go. Well, I got there, and they were preparing in the final moments, and no one had really said anything to me about instructions. And I thought, I need to check with someone before this goes live. And so I walked over to the MC and I just said, hey, I said, which microphone am I supposed to use? The stationary one that you have here on the podium, or the handheld microphone that you've been using in the rehearsal? And that made his eyes and a couple other people that were standing around him, they kind of got wild-eyed, and they just said, did they not talk to you? And I said, talk to me about what? And they said, your prayer. I said, what about it? And they said, well, if you were going to pray, you can't say God. I'm like, excuse me? They said, you can't say God. We'll get sued. And they said, now and they were relaying instructions from someone else. They said, now, we've been told that you can say creator, but you can't say God. And they said, can you do that? And I mean, we're about a minute from start, y'all. And so I had a quick decision to make. I thought, okay, do I make a scene? Do I cause a fuss here? Or do I just, take the loss? I'm going to call it a loss for the day, quote unquote. And I thought, hey, this is not the time to have this debate or this argument. And I just looked at him and I said, if you're telling me that I have to say a prayer and address the Creator in a specific way, and that I cannot say Heavenly Father, I cannot say God, if you're giving me the parameters of how I'm going to address who I'm praying to, I've got to tell you, no, I cannot and I will not. And so they said, we understand, and they apologized. They were so gracious and apologetic. And I said, hey, I'm just going to go right over here in the bleachers. I'm going to stay for the ceremony. And, that's that. And so what they did in lieu of was a moment of silence. And I'm not a big fan of that. I guess I'd rather have it than nothing. But the whole point is the way that we pray in this country has changed drastically. And it got me to think, and hey, I don't want you to focus on the fact, man, I can't believe they did that to him. That's not the focus of this episode, so stay with me. I will tell you this, as a 22-year Army veteran, active duty, as a combat veteran, as a pastor, in the moment that they told me, hey, you can pray, but you can't say God, I thought, well, who in the world are we praying to, fellas? But in the moment that they told me, I've got a very good poker face. And so I didn't relay any emotion whatsoever, but I was disappointed. I was discouraged, and I was dismayed. I'm going to call it what it was. I was dismayed. Served my country 22 years. I'm a pastor, and I got invited to this, and now you're telling me how I must pray. And I just thought, how crazy things have gotten, and how twisted things have gotten, and how things have changed. And it reminded me of a print, an art print that used to be in my parents' dining room. And when my parents passed away, those of you, my older friends, some of you will understand this. You know, it's a very difficult season, especially when you clear the home out and you've given away things, you've sold things, and you're maybe taking the last few things that are really sentimental. But when you leave that house for the last time, and that's maybe the house you grew up in, or it's the house you went home to for Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, and you know, and you got all these family memories that were created. And when you leave that for the last time, that's an emotionally draining moment in your life. And so all that to say, you can't take everything. And I'm a very sentimental creature. You know, there's some things that, you know, I wish I would have kept that I didn't. But one of the things I did not keep that I wish I had have kept was this art print that was on the dining room wall. And I can't tell you how many times I looked at it, how many times I read it, how many times I thought about it and reflected on it. And in this moment this week, when they told me that I had to pray a certain way or I wouldn't be able to do it, I just remembered back to the print. And I've got to get this. It's a quote by William Penn, and the actual art on it, it's got the Liberty Bell, and it's got the old, 17th century type scroll and pen, feather quill pen. And the words that it says are this: men will be governed by God, or they'll be ruled by tyrants. Let that sink in for just a second. Men will be, and women, by the way, men will be governed by God, or they will be ruled by tyrants. William Penn, first governor of Pennsylvania, said that. And I can't tell you, as I have grown older, what that quote means to me, how I have seen it play out, and how I know that it is the absolute truth. Hey, y'all, we're either going to do it God's way or we're going to do it the world's way. And if we choose to do it the world's way, it's going to be confusing. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be divisive. It's going to be combative. It's going to be totally unproductive. And as I was just sitting here thinking about this, I didn't have a lot of scriptures to throw out in this episode, but I do want to make this comment. Hey, be careful what you ask for. And we've seen that played out throughout history. I'm thinking specifically about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and they thought they wanted something different than what they had. And I'm not saying what they had, the czars, the kings. It was an empire, the Russian Empire. I'm not saying what they had was the best that they could have, but their people made it. I'm not picking on the Russians. I'm just talking about history. They decided that they wanted something different. Well, they got something different, and if you look at what's transpired in that country because of the political system that replaced the Russian czars, millions upon millions upon millions of Russian citizens have been killed over the past 100 years. So my point is, again, I'm not picking on my friends, the Russians, just talking about some of their history. We can pick multiple countries. The point, don't lose it. Be careful what you ask for. And so as I was thinking about, well, where is that in the Bible? Where is that in Scripture? Pastors always do that, by the way. The Israelites, they ask for a king. because God always intended that he would be our ruler, but he's a benevolent ruler. He's a good ruler. And I want to read it in the Message because I read it in the NIV. Don't know what version you use, but let's just kind of modernize it just a little bit. So I'm going to read when the Israelites kind of got fed up with the prophets that were leading them, specifically Samuel, who was arguably the greatest prophet that ever led the nation of Israel, ruled over them justly, honorably, ethically, but they still weren't happy, and they wanted to be like the rest of the nations that they saw around them. And so they kind of went to Samuel, and they rose up and they asked for a king. And again, remember the point here, be careful what you ask for. So here it is in 1 Samuel 8, beginning with verse 4-5. I'm going to read through this very quickly. So fed up, all the elders of Israel got together. They confronted Samuel at Ramah, and they presented their case. Look, you're an old man, and your sons aren't following in your footsteps. Here's what we want you to do. Appoint a king to rule us, just like everybody else. Hey, be careful, y'all, of wanting to be like everybody else. When Samuel heard their demand, give us a king to rule us, he was crushed. How awful. Samuel prayed to God. God answered Samuel, go ahead and do what they're asking. They're not rejecting you. They've rejected me as their king. From the day I brought them out of Egypt until this very day, they've been behaving like this, leaving me for other gods. And now they're doing it to you. So let them have their own way. Hey, be careful when you get your own way. But warn them of what, this is God still talking to Samuel, but warn them of what they're in for. Tell them the way that kings operate, just what they're likely to get from a king. So Samuel told them, delivered God's warning to the people who were asking him to give them a king. And here's what Samuel said. This is the way the kind of king you're talking about operates. He'll take your sons, he'll make soldiers of them, chariots, cavalry, infantry, regimented in battalions and squadrons. He'll put some to forced labor on his farms, plowing and harvesting, others to making either weapons of war or chariots in which he can ride in luxury. He will put your daughters to work as beauticians and waitresses and cooks. He will conscript your best fields, your vineyards, your orchards, and hand them over to his special friends. He will tax your harvest and vintage to support his extensive bureaucracy. Your prize workers and your best animals he'll take for his own use. He will lay a tax on your flocks, and you'll end up no better than slaves. I know this is ancient Israel that we're talking about, a period of almost 4,000 years ago, but listen to what it's saying. He will lay a tax on your flocks. You'll end up no better than slaves. The day will come when you will cry out in desperation because of this king you so much want for yourselves. But don't expect God to answer. But the people wouldn't listen to Samuel. No, they said, we will have a king to rule us. Then we'll be just like all the other nations. Our king will rule us and lead us and fight our battles. So Samuel took in what they said and he rehearsed it with God. He basically told God exactly what the people had told him. And then here's what God told Samuel. Do what they say, make them a king. That, my friends, be careful what you ask for. That's a story that's 4,000 years old, but it talks about not being satisfied, not being happy, thinking that we know better, especially know better than God. And as I read that story again, I go back and I'm reminded of that art print that hung in my parents' living room or dining room. Men will be governed by God, or they'll be ruled by tyrants. I don't want anything to do with a tyrant. I want to be governed by God. And here's the thing. I have a say in that. You have a say in that. Hey, we can submit to a ruler who's good, who's kind, who's just, who's compassionate, Every good thing we read in the Bible, that is a characteristic of a good and loving God. And that's the God. Notice that it doesn't use the word ruled, governed. Only God can properly govern his creation. We need his help. We're not capable of doing it ourselves. And if we refuse to be governed by God, we're going to be ruled by tyrants. Hey, so what are you suggesting, Rex? I'm just reminding all of us, let's be careful what we ask for and what we want to change about our culture, about our heritage, about the things that we hold dear as a country. And the fact that I was told, how to pray, I was just like, my goodness, things have certainly changed. And I just got to looking some statistics up about that, because when I was in second grade, we were still praying, y'all. We said a daily prayer. And there you said the Pledge of Allegiance. Most days there was a short devotional. Sometimes they did that over the loudspeaker. A student actually went to the principal's office and a student led that short devotional over the loudspeaker. But it was just a different time than what it is now. So I went back and I was just looking at how drastic things have changed. In 1949, I got a buddy down in Montgomery. His name's Josh. And he's always, when I talk historic stuff, he's like, do you remember that? In 1949. No, Josh, I do not remember 1949. I was not born. But in 1949, Bible reading was a routine part of daily activity in 37 states. Now, I don't know what was going on in the other 13, but 37 states had routine Bible reading in 1949. In 1960, the year that I was born, 42% of school districts required Bible reading and 50% reported some form of homeroom daily devotional exercise. Let me read that stat again. In 1960, 42% of school districts required Bible reading and 50% reported some form of homeroom daily devotional exercise. That made me think about the McGuffey Reader. I'm a history buff. I also like old books, old and rare books, and I have a McGuffey Reader that was published in the early 1800s, and it's fascinating to me that McGuffey Readers were the predominant textbook for learning to read in the American public school system. And guess what is contained in page after page after page of a McGuffey Reader? The Bible verses. That's what public school used to educate our children. So I find it fascinating that people will debate and argue and say this is a secular nation. It was never intended to be Christian. We have freedom from religion, all the different arguments that you hear. And that's not the purpose of this particular podcast, to debate that. I'm just telling you it changed, because I've lived in a time where we didn't have a problem with public prayer. We didn't have a problem with public reading of Scripture. And now, as a 64-year-old man, veteran, combat veteran, pastor, I got told in a public place how I could pray. Something wrong with that. So we're going to have to decide who we are going to follow. And again, I go back to today's quote: men will be governed by God, or we will be ruled by tyrants. So anyway, I threw out a couple of stats. Again, that the year that I was in second grade, that was 1968, when we were still saying prayers and doing the devotionals over the loudspeaker. In 1978, that's when I graduated high school. Check this out. Two local businesses in my small hometown presented each senior with a book about the 12 disciples and the impact that they had made on the world. And they were encouraged. They wrote us a little note, every senior in front of it: go make your impact on the world. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got that as a parting gift from public school. And now I'm being told, 46 years later, I'm being told how I can pray in public. Absolute insanity. So read the passage in 1 Samuel. I'm kind of looking through my notes. I wrote out some quick notes. As I've told you guys, we don't have interns on the show. I don't have people fact checking everything I say, but we do try to be very reasonable, rational, factual in everything we put out as a topic. So here's where I want to end this and land it. The question is, we got an election coming up, and I know that makes people very tense. And again, there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of divisiveness. And again, combative is the word that comes to mind to me. Man, we're just so combative with each other. What in the world happened to us that we can't have a reasonable, rational debate with each other, a civil debate, a gracious debate, and say, hey, I really don't agree with you on that point. Please help me understand why you're so adamant about that particular viewpoint. Our country was founded on the ability to have a civil discourse with each other. And it seems like that has all but disappeared. Well, I'm telling you, we're setting ourselves up. I'm going to say the quote again. Men will be governed by God, and I'm doing a little bit of insertion now. They'll be governed by God, and we're treat each other according to his ways, or we'll be ruled by tyrants and anything goes. We'll mistreat each other. We'll speak to each other any way we please. We'll be selfish. We'll be combative. We'll be divisive. And that's exactly what we see playing out in front of us in this particular culture. So just want to encourage you. So out of that, you say, well, yeah, you're not encouraging me. How can you encourage me? Todd Beamer, hey, let's roll. I truly believe that if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, you've been placed. God destined you for this period in history. And let's be salt and light to a world that may not agree with us. They may not believe anything that we hold dear in terms of the Bible, in terms of who Jesus was. But here's something that has been a topic of discussion both in the church, in my church, in the Big C church, and even at a lot of small groups that I'm a part of. What picture of Jesus are we presenting to the world around us? That's the real issue. And a lot of the surveys are showing people are a little bit skeptical of church, but they're not skeptical of Jesus. They're open to Jesus. So what picture are we presenting to them to represent Jesus? We're his ambassadors on the earth. And an ambassador presents the very best of his country or whatever it is that he's representing. An ambassador, he or she, they are presenting the very best of what their country, what their organization, in this case, what their God has to offer. I want to be an ambassador for Christ that paints a picture of the goodness, the grace, the mercy, the love, the compassion, everything that Jesus Christ has to offer. And so I'm not going to get flustered when I have an event happen like happened this week. Was I dismayed by it? Certainly I was. Was I disappointed by it? Certainly I was. But am I disrupted by it? Absolutely not, because I am going to hold fast to what my father taught me, what elders around me taught me, and not because they said it, but because they lived it. And I saw the difference in their life and the difference it made in our families, in our communities, and it was good. It was positive. It was life-giving, and it all pointed to a God in the Bible that cares about you and me, and he's got our best interest at heart. He's always working on our behalf. And so I really want to encourage you in that as we wrap up this episode. Let's roll. Todd Beamer, man, what a great legacy that he left with his wife, with his children. Let's roll. And I'm going to add this. I saw something recently. I don't even know who the pastor was. He was in his 90s, and somebody was interviewing him, and it was on a Facebook feed, and I scrolled past it really, really quick, but I just stopped for a moment to see what they were talking about. And here's the only part of it I caught, and I'd really love to go back and listen to the rest of it, because this 15 seconds that I caught was phenomenal. This 90-year-old pastor, younger younger pastor was interviewing him. He said, hey, after all these years of ministry and all these years of following Jesus and following Christ and adhering to the gospel, what advice do you have for the rest of us? And the guy's answer was so simple, but it was phenomenal. And he said, I'm going to tell you two things. Adhere to the authority of the Bible and pray. And the guy the interviewer was kind of taken back and maybe even stunned a little bit. And he said, really? He said, that's it? And he said, no, that's not it. That's everything. The authority of Scripture, read it, study it, meditate on it, let it permeate our innermost being, and then pray. And I thought, wow, what phenomenal advice from a guy that's been doing this all of his life, in his 90s. And basically, even though he didn't say it, I'm going to say it. He was telling the rest of us, hey, let's roll. So I hope that encourages you. No matter what happens in those moments that you get disappointed, you get thrown a curveball like I was there at that event. Hey, yeah, I got a curveball, but Jesus specializes in helping you hit those and knock them over the fence. So let's stay positive, and let's always remember, let's always be able to talk from generation to generation.
Hey, if you enjoyed our episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review because it helps people who don't know about us hear our message. And if you want to follow us on our socials, follow us at G2G_podcast on Instagram and Generation to Generation on Facebook.